The 15th of April, 1945, Bergen-Belsen, northern Germany. British soldiers enter a Nazi concentration camp filled with scenes few of them could have imagined. Some 13,000 corpses lie unburied across the camp, while 60,000 emaciated survivors watch the newcomers with exhaustion and disbelief. The air is heavy with the stench of death, and the silence is disturbed only by faint cries from those still clinging to life. British forces take the male and female Nazi personnel into custody and force them to help bury the dead in mass graves. Among them is a 21-year-old former guard who will soon become one of the most notorious women associated with a Nazi concentration camp system. Prisoners know her as the Beast of Belsen and the Hyena of Auschwitz. Her name is Irma Grese. Irma Ilse Ida Grese was born on the 7th of October 1923 in Vrechen, a small hamlet in Mecklenburg, in northern Germany. She was the third of 5 children born to a dairy worker employed on a small estate. Money was scarce, but poverty was not the only hardship within the family home. Her father, Alfred Grese, was a deeply religious, conservative, and authoritarian man who demanded complete obedience from his children. The family was shattered in January 1936 when Irma Grese's mother, Bertha, took her own life after discovering that her husband was involved with a younger local woman. 12-year-old Irma found her mother's body, and in the aftermath of her death, life in the household became even colder. When Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party came into power on the 30th of January 1933, Irma Grese was 9 years old, meaning much of her childhood and adolescence would unfold under the Nazi regime. Her school years were difficult. She struggled with her lessons and was bullied by other pupils. Her younger sister Helena later said that Irma had been a timid girl who usually ran away from conflict. In 1938, at the age of 14, she left school without a certificate and moved through a series of unskilled jobs. She joined the League of German Girls, which was the female branch of the Hitler Youth. This Nazi youth movement offered Irma something she had found neither at home nor at school: a uniform, a place within a group, and the belief that a poor girl from Mecklenburg belonged to the German master race. The Second World War began on the 1st of September 1939, when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. The same year, Grese found work as an untrained nursing assistant at the sanatorium in Hohenlichen, around 100 kilometers or 62 miles north of Berlin, where members of the Nazi paramilitary organization, the SS, received treatment. The institution was directed by Karl Gebhardt, a senior Nazi doctor who during the war carried out criminal surgical experiments on female prisoners at the nearby Ravensbrück concentration camp. Grese admired Gebhardt and hoped to train as a nurse, but because she had left school without qualifications, she could not meet the entry requirements. Her path into the concentration camp system began through one of Gebhardt's contacts at Ravensbrück. Grese was told to apply again after turning 18, and in July 1942 she entered Ravensbrück, the main Nazi concentration camp for women, as a trainee. Her training lasted 3 weeks, after which she became an Aufseherin, the Nazi term for a female overseer. The uniform of the female camp guard finally destroyed the remnants of the relationship with her family. During a visit home in 1943, her father discovered what she was doing, struck her, and threw her out of the house. In March 1943, Grese was transferred to Auschwitz-Birkenau in German-occupied Poland. Birkenau was the largest part of the Auschwitz complex, which consisted of more than 40 camps and subcamps. It was also one of the main centers of the mass murder of European Jews, with specially built gas chambers and crematoria. At first, Grese performed ordinary camp duties, but she soon began supervising a Strafkommando, a punishment labor unit. She discovered that in Auschwitz, violence was not only permitted but encouraged. In May 1944, when she was only 20, Irma Grese was promoted and placed in charge of Camp C, a section of 31 huts that held around 30,000 Jewish women from Poland and Hungary. While working as a camp guard, Grese had a whip made for her in the camp weaving factory from plaited cellophane. During her trial, she described it as translucent and similar to white glass. She also admitted that it caused enormous pain when she struck someone with it. Carrying the whip was forbidden, which showed that she acted even beyond the rules imposed by the men who controlled Birkenau. Josef Kramer, the SS officer who commanded Birkenau in 1944 and later held the same position in Bergen-Belsen, had ordered female overseers to stop carrying whips. Grese admitted in court that she and the other guards had ignored him. She acknowledged that she had never been authorized to beat prisoners, that she had done so in defiance of orders, and that she had instructed the women under her command to do the same without permission. In this respect, her treatment of prisoners was at times even more brutal than that of the male SS officers, including the camp commander. Gertrude Diamant, who had seen Irma in Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen, recalled that Grese's favorite treatment of women was to beat them until they fell to the ground, and then kick them as hard as she could with her heavy boots. Diamant later added, "She frequently caused blood to flow, and in my opinion, many of the people she injured were likely to die from such injuries." Grese denied the accusation, but other survivors described the same pattern of violence. Masha Greenbaum remembered, "When we saw her, we used to run, just run, because when she met you, she kicked you to the floor. And then she went to the neck with her boots, and she just killed people like that." Grese also took part in selections during which SS doctors divided prisoners into those who would continue working and those who would be sent to the gas chambers. She testified that the doctor she accompanied during these selections was Josef Mengele, known as the Angel of Death. Women were usually forced to stand naked during the selections, and Grese and the other guards dragged back anyone who tried to escape the selection. Before they sent them back to the line, they whipped and beat them until they bled. During the time when she worked in Nazi concentration camps, Irma Grese had affairs with several SS officers, including Josef Mengele, who ended their relationship upon discovering she was also involved with Jewish inmates, whom the Nazi ideology deemed racially inferior. Another of her lovers was the aforementioned commandant of Auschwitz-Birkenau, Josef Kramer. According to the Auschwitz survivor, Olga Lengel, Grese had numerous lovers, which resulted in sexually transmitted diseases and numerous abortions. One of these was performed by Dr. Gisela Perl, during which Irma's only concern was the pain she would feel. Beyond these affairs, survivors widely remembered Grese as a sexual predator who engaged in sadistic relationships with both male SS personnel and female Jewish prisoners. She abused women sexually, exploiting her absolute power over their bodies and lives, treating some as temporary possessions, and, once bored of them, selecting them for death at the next selection. She abused male prisoners too, and when a handsome Georgian man rejected her advances, she publicly tortured his girlfriend, dragging her by the hair and whipping her. The man was later executed, while his girlfriend was sent to the camp brothel. Because of her appearance and cruelty, prisoners gave her nicknames that became infamous: the Hyena of Auschwitz and the Beautiful Beast. These names reflected the contrast between her youthful, attractive appearance and her extreme brutality against the prisoners. However, there was one prisoner whom Irma treated differently. She was a young Jewish woman from Slovakia named Magda Hellinger. The two called each other simply Magda and Irma. Although Grese was extremely sadistic towards other prisoners, she developed a liking for Magda. One day, before roll call, 2 runners came with 4 women, whose breasts had been split open after Irma Grese had struck them with her whip. After Magda took care of the women, she told Irma, "Imagine if somebody did that to you. Shame on you." At that moment, Irma lifted her whip at Magda, who said, "Strike, strike. I know you like to see blood. I am offended." After Magda walked away, Irma came after her and said quietly, "Forgive me." Irma Grese, who treated Magda like an elder sister, even asked her what she thought of her new boyfriend, whom she introduced to Magda. Thanks to the possessions looted from murdered prisoners, Irma Grese wore elegant clothes from across Europe. Her favorite outfit was a sky blue jacket with a dark blue tie, tailored by Jewish inmates at Birkenau. She often spent hours styling herself in front of a mirror, dreaming of fame. Irma once declared, "After the war, I am going to be in films. You will see my name as a star on the screen. I know life, and I have seen many things. I feel my experience will be useful in my career as an artist." This future never came. In January 1945, as the Red Army moved towards Auschwitz, the SS forced prisoners to march west in what became known as the Death Marches. Grese accompanied one column to Ravensbrück, and then, in March 1945, continued to Bergen-Belsen. Belsen did not have gas chambers, but tens of thousands of prisoners died there from typhus and hunger. Dieter Kraus, who was liberated in the camp, remembered seeing women crouched around a pot in which they had cooked a human liver. At Bergen-Belsen, Grese continued to abuse prisoners as she forced them to perform exhausting exercises that she called making sport, even when most were too weak to move. Shortly before the liberation, Grese struck the heads of 2 starving sisters together because they had been eating potato peelings. When later asked about the prisoners, she said, without showing any remorse, that they had been dirty and ill. Despite serving in Bergen-Belsen for only a few weeks, her cruelty was so intense that inmates immediately named her the Beast of Belsen. Bergen-Belsen was liberated by British soldiers on the 15th of April, 1945. 2 days later, Irma Grese was arrested and, together with other SS personnel, forced to help bury the dead in mass graves. They were given starvation rations, not allowed to use gloves or other protective clothing, and were continuously shouted at and threatened to make sure that they did not stop working. Survivors later recalled that enraged prisoners pushed her head into a camp toilet, a moment of humiliation that starkly contrasted with the power she had once exercised over prisoners' life and death. Her trial began in Lüneburg, a town in northern Germany, on the 17th of September 1945, under the official title trial of Josef Kramer and 44 others. Grese's behavior during the trial strengthened the image created by the evidence. Irma Grese appeared cold, arrogant, and detached, corrected prosecutors with irritation, and answered questions in a sharp, defensive tone. When survivors described beatings, shootings, and selections, she showed no visible remorse and dismissed accusations as exaggerations, claiming that prisoners were disciplined only because they disobeyed orders. Even worse, Grese laughed while survivors described their suffering in concentration camps. On one occasion, Grese laughed so hard that she had to lean forward in the prisoner's box to try to control herself. This happened when Josef Kramer's wife told the court that her husband had walked through their home at night after returning from Auschwitz, disturbed by the gassing and crying, "Why, why, why?" As Kramer's wife left the courtroom, she was slapped in the face by a Polish woman. Irma Grese's composure broke only once. When her sister Helena testified about the conflict with her father, Grese began to sob. Her tears appeared only when the court returned to her own childhood, not when it described the people who had suffered under her authority. On the 17th of November, 1945, the court sentenced Grese to death by hanging. One observer wrote that after hearing the sentence, she cried continuously, her eyes were red and sunken, and she was extremely nervous. She asked for mercy, but in early December, Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, who commanded British forces in occupied Germany, rejected the appeals. When she was hanged by British executioner Albert Pierpoint at Hameln Prison on the 13th of December, 1945, she was 22 years old. Walking to the gallows, her final and only word was schnell, meaning quickly. Grese was the youngest woman to die judicially under British law in the 20th century.
Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.